Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian Farmer, Strategic Trade Group, and this is your end of day market recap for Tuesday, the 7th of January. And maybe I would call this a turnaround Tuesday, but to the downside, especially for the growth stocks. I'll get to that. I'll also get to, what happened today in terms of volatility picking up again today. Did we break support levels? Is Nvidia a false breakout because it did touch new highs? I will go through those charts in just a second. Risk disclaimer in front of you. Everything that we're going through is for information purposes only, not giving any advice or recommendations. Please read the full risk disclaimer right there. And I'm going to, as you can see, I'm trying to go fast today because there's a lot to cover for the day. There's a lot of charts to go over. So let me start with I always like to kind of give a quick summary of the morning, and because I get questions from Tribeca Trade Group members about like, hey, what was it that caused today's spill? And so we had 10 o'clock economic data, and that was part of the culprit. But things were already looking a little bit weak going into that economic data, and I had started to say something in the trading room today, like right around like 9:55, and I'm like, I don't like the way things are looking. Things are kind of looking not so great to the downside. And I said, well, let's see what the 10 o'clock numbers are going to show. And those numbers, the ISM services numbers, comes out hotter than expected, 54.53. And the JOLTS jobs openings come out, so more job openings out there. So you would think, oh, okay, that's good news, right? Well, in this right now in this market, the good news is considered bad news because what is happening? So we're already at a very weak trend in terms of what bonds are doing. So this kind of just leaned on bonds a little bit further, and that was the big initial reaction. Now, previously, what I've been saying is, because there's been so much attention on bond yields, I kind of went a little bit the other way with this yesterday, and I was saying what I have been saying is that if there's small incremental moves in bonds, like the market, like people can adjust to small moves gradual moves. When they're larger moves, then the market tends to freak out, and I think that's what we had a little bit today. But like I said, I thought it was already going that way. So you have both bond yields higher. Right. So, and we can look at this because I know sometimes this confuses people because you got to remember that when you're looking at TLT, it's the inverse of bond yields, right? It's bond prices. But here's what TNX looks like so that you could see what the yield is doing. And, this has been moving higher. Right. So again, bond prices moving lower, yields are moving higher, right? That's the way a bond works. And then also the dollar was up again today too. So dollar was up about 0.4 of a percentage point. TLT down 1.1%. So yeah, I mean, we can start there because, I know I don't really like to, it's usually not a great day when I start with bonds. I will say this, there is a VPOC that's taken out down below. Another thing that I've been talking about is we have not taken out in TLT, we have not taken out the lows, I will say yet. There's some support here, right? For going back to where we were, where was this? This was April of last year. And then of course we've got lower levels too. So, you have to remember what happened during April of last year, or how was the stock market last year? Well, it was pretty good, even though TLT spent some time around the same levels. So, will we get a rally in bonds? I don't know that. I know that what we want to see is we don't want to see this really starting to head down. Now, so let's see if this VPOC provides some support down here. Would I buy here? No. And I've been kind of saying this. I've had a lot of questions about people wanting to go long bonds. I don't get it. Why people want to go long bonds because they just don't move that much for you to make that much of a killing unless you really size up a trade. But we know that it affects a lot of different things. So that's part of the story today. I think also you had Nvidia, right? So I'm going to get to that. I want to go over the index charts first and then a little bit of the market dynamics for today. But all right, so here's SPY. I mean, this is tricky, guys. And what I mean by tricky is one way we start leaning in one direction, and then the very next day we reverse it. So to me, that defines like a tricky type market. And we're basically back to where we were just a couple days ago. So, everybody got all bulled up, me included, because like the way that we closed on Friday, everybody started to see like growth stocks acted so well towards the end of last week that everybody was talking about, oh my God, like we're going to see so many good setups and so forth. But one day or 2 days is not going to doesn't make a trend, right? And you kind of just have to keep that in perspective. Like, the last thing, because remember, like, what part of the reason I think that we bounced in here is because sentiment got pretty low. So when sentiment gets really hot again, right, then you're kind of losing that whole reason why you bounced in the first place. So in any event, let me get to the technicals, and then I'll give you my opinion here. But again, this could be right. Again, people are going to get mad at me when I say this, but but I've seen people talk about this. Could this be a Head and Shoulders top? Of course. A lot of times things look like a Head and Shoulders, and they're not. Case in point, Nvidia looked like a Head and Shoulders for a bit. Left shoulder, head, right shoulder, maybe a second right shoulder here. And I'm just pointing these things out so that you could be prepared. That's all. I think people get really upset when you talk really bullish or when you talk really bearish. But really, I don't try to be either one of those things. Do I think that the market goes up over time? Yes, absolutely, because it does, right? And there's always these stats like, oh, if the market goes down 5 days in a row, it'll be up 70% of the time a year later. Well, yeah, that's because the market goes up over time. And I'm just making up that 70% number, but yes, so that's why I lean a little bit more towards the optimistic side because that's what the market does over time. But it doesn't mean that we can't, go down and, the top of the value area for the year is about 4.6% away, right? So we could break this. So again, I would watch these lows. I don't like that we broke the value area for the month, but again, one day is not a trend, and we'll just kind of have to see what we do tomorrow. And we've got more going back to I talked about economics that we had today. This is a heavy event a week in terms of economics, right? It's something else that I tweeted yesterday was saying, hey, I wouldn't be surprised if we see some profit taking because we've got things like ISM data, which I talked about in yesterday's video. The ISM is important. It's a leading indicator, right? We're also going to get tomorrow the Fed minutes. Probably I would think something is going to come out hawkish about that, about them dialing down the possibility of more interest rate cuts. And then on Friday, you're going to get private payrolls, right? Or the jobs data. So, it's a lot of information. We also have another bond auction, right? So it's tough for bonds to go up. I mean, the demand is going to have to be good for this 30-year bond auction for tomorrow for bonds to stabilize, which concerns me a little bit because it's just more supply that's coming on. In any event, that's where we are here. I just also wanted to show, how I basically traded today. I didn't do much today, other than I unwound some trades. I looked for us holding support in here. This was around like 11 o'clock this morning. Where's the other value area? Why is this not showing up? But in any event, I was looking for this to hold and bounce. We did, and you can kind of see how I traded this. Let's bring this up. All right, here we go. So I got the right chart up here, right? So first of all, so we came down, VPOC being taken out yesterday. That kind of marked right around the top of the day. So overhead supply. So we came in here. I did try a trade, and it worked for about a half a minute. I did try going long. I just went long SPY. I said, of course, you could go long. Whenever I do this in the room, like I always suggest, because sometimes I use SPXL. You could also use SPX options. But if I'm scalping, sometimes I'm going to be if I want to be in and out very quickly. Sometimes I'm comfortable even if it's a very high ETF as SPY. But I took two quick targets in this. And I said in the room, like, I don't know if this trade's going to work. And here, again, I waited probably a little bit too long. Like I said, I thought that we had a chance to kind of hang in here. We didn't, and then we broke in. So you could see bearish 80% rule. Your next support is down here at 585.47. So, and until, we're kind of in no man's land. Like if you're looking to play something from the long side, is it possible we could get back above the value area? Of course. But when I see bearish 80% rule, I would rather let this play out a little bit. And then if we do that, we kind of just go back to where we were last week. So again, this could be also, right, instead of, looking at directions up and down, right, one of the possibilities of this year is that we just kind of go sideways a bit and fade moves. Here's the cues, right? Talked about this briefly in yesterday's video. Just fix this volume here. For some reason, it keeps doing that. But I had talked about this. I believe I talked about it in yesterday's video. I certainly put this out on Substack yesterday. We clipped the top of the value area yesterday, and that was it. right? And I said, yeah, I think I did say in yesterday's video, I'm like, well, keep in mind we had a big day yesterday. We kind of hung in there, and then we really kind of fell down. So we didn't hold here, right? That was again first level of support, and the bottom of value. We've got two levels of support down here. One is for the value area for the month. The other is the value area for the week. So these are not that far down, another 0.5% down, another 0.7 of a percentage point. I would rather have a sell off in the overnight market and then come ready to kind of buy the dip a little bit. But we'll see. Another thing that I mentioned, I was looking for things as we were kind of coming down. I was like, geez, I don't really like any major setups. One other area of concern that I think is different than last week, and um, I was noticing that Bitcoin was acting very well last week. All right, so let's bring up Bitcoin. That was the one thing where I was like, um, one of the things that I saw last week that was positive, right? And Bitcoin was actually going higher and stabilizing while the market was selling off last week. In the beginning of last week. I don't know why this keeps doing that. In any event, so this is another rejection, right? You're gonna like that's probably the word of the day is rejection, right? Rejected here for Bitcoin and back into like the 20-day moving average, lower high put in here. So again, it's disappointing, right? Start to see this get going. Maybe this can break higher and a down 5% day, like not even like an inside day or something like that to say, okay, you can kind of be a little positive. Down 5% is pretty interesting. I wanted to bring up one other stock here because we talked about this. If you attended last night's webinar, right? We did a webinar for members last night, or anybody who has the MarketWebs, and I talked about MSTR because I was looking at this at the end of the day. And I said when we were looking at this at the end of the day, I'm not going to buy on a VPOC, right? Because we know VPOCs are. Oops, just go back here. 1 second. Let me fix this chart here for a second. All right, there we go. So I was like, oh, the chart is starting to shape up here in MSTR, right? It got back above its 50-day moving average, right? I generally, when things are in an uptrend for a long time, and when they break the 50-day moving average, to me, it's a big no-no, right? To me, it's like, hey, the trend could be possibly changing, especially if that's something has been above like the 50-day moving average for months, right? And MSTR has been above its 50-day moving average since September. So you begin to break that down. Like to me, it says get out of the way, and it could be a nice short setup. And as it was when it broke the 20-day moving average, but it did this reversal. And then if we retake the 50-day moving average, I'm all about it. Now, so again, I looked at this and I said, this looks pretty good in MSTR. Didn't do anything because I looked on the 1 hour chart and I said, we took out this VPOC. Let's see how it handles this little bit of short-term overhead supply. It didn't handle it very well, right? And it got moved down. Now, if it ends up staying above 344, again, this is the bottom of the value area for the month, right? That would be a positive, right? Because we're kind of saving that. So that's something that I'll be watching for tomorrow. All right, let's get to probably spend about over 10 minutes at this point, and I haven't talked about Nvidia yet. Geez, again, like uh if this is your like one takeaway from this video, and you hear me say this all the time, right? The buy the rumor, sell the news. This happens so many times, right? Stocks love to run up into events, right? As soon as we heard about what time Nvidia was doing their CES event, right, and that they were going to be speaking multiple times on Monday, the stock ran up into it, right? And it's always about like it's 90% of trades. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say 90% of trades, but it's an awful lot of times when you have a catalyst for an event, and Apple does the same thing. When they announce their event, they love to rally into the event. And then it's a lot of times what happens with a very widely expected earnings report too, right? If everybody is expecting big things out of an earnings report, regardless of the name, the stock runs up into the report. Right. We used to see this for like a number of years with all the FANG stocks. They would run into their earnings reports because people were excited, right? And that's going back a few years that phenomenon would happen. But younger traders, and I hate to say it like this, but they always want to know, like, oh my God, what's going to happen on the event, and they bet on the event, right? But that's a much harder trade. It's not to say that that won't work, but especially like in option trades, the premium is jacked, right? Because of the unknown event, and once the event becomes known, then the premium goes down quite a bit, right? So it's a much tougher trade. The more of the trade like that, I would say seasoned veterans of trading usually do is they do the buy the rumor. And that's what happened with SMH and with Nvidia. So I want to look at both of these charts, but again, it is such a timely, again, it's not fun, right? It's more fun to bet on like, just like the Super Bowl, right? You don't know what's going to happen on the Super Bowl. It's fun to bet on the Super Bowl, right? There's no doubt about it. It's fun to bet on the events, but it's just that it's betting on, you're taking out your edge, right? And sometimes trading edge is not exactly the most fun thing in the world. So this is a very ugly looking candle for Nvidia. That could be one of the largest sell-off days. I don't know if this is the largest sell-off day ever for Nvidia. Now, I'm not smart enough to know all the things that they announced in that conference last night. I was watching, um, you know, late night last night. I was listening to it. I'm not smart enough to know if all those things are going to move the needle that the CEO of Nvidia said last night, in his new leather type jacket that he was wearing. I don't know, so I pay attention to the price action, and this is not a very good, not telling. Now, so we've basically have to hold right here, right, and that's the top of the value area for the month. If we break that, because that also lines up perfectly with the 50-day moving average, then it's the breakout trade is not there anymore. And you could say, if you want to, that the breakout trade failed for today. I mean, that's as big of rejection that you could possibly see, right at the area where it's supposed to begin to go higher. So also brings up the question is, are we going to see a lot more of this for stocks that have gone up a lot, right, in 2024? Are we going to see a lot more rejections? It's possible. We haven't had that market in a while. We've been pretty lucky that a lot of breakout type trades have worked well, but I certainly can remember times where the breakout trades have failed, right? And so this is one to kind of keep an eye on, because Nvidia is an important stock. And I would really pay attention to what happens here at 140.50, right? And so let me go back to the just so that you can see this a bit more clearly. But here's also the chart, the weekly bar developing. So keep in mind, we've got 2 more days left. Thursday's a holiday. So we've got Wednesday and Friday. Like, this would really be good if this could stay above 143.66, but it may not. It might not be able to do that in the next 2 days, but that would also be something that I would be um, looking for or hoping that it does. And again, that's not that far from here. 143.66 is right here. Okay. Also notice the VPOC that came into play here too, which rejected things. Also the semis, right? The semis were looking really good, started to kind of break this range, but same thing here. Like, this is the value area for the whole year. And again, I can look at that just with the weekly chart. And you're going to note here that uh, eh, not, but again, the week's not over, right? So this is not a daily bar. This is a weekly candle, right? And we're not done yet with the week. We've got 2 more days. So while this looks pretty bad, you could think of your own adjective, but it looks like a rejection, right? So, you know, it's all about, for me, the way that I do my trading is I have plenty of ideas, right? And I will execute on some of those ideas and try those ideas. I don't have a crystal ball. What I do is I have a pretty good roadmap of supply and demand in front of me, which is the value areas. And if this doesn't cut it, right, and if it doesn't hold, above the value, or if it doesn't manage to clear this value area, for the year, then the momentum is not there anymore. Number two, if it doesn't hold the top, because again, like, okay, if this comes in and back checks this, right, the semi trade may still be good, but you might need more patience. So number one, this would be very good if we held here by the end of the week. If we didn't, then the next thing I would be watching here, and if we break into this, then we've got nothing. Then we're basically back in the range, and it kind of neutralizes everything. All right. Sometimes that's just how it works, guys, and you got to be tough, right? I was talking to, I think we talked about this in the webinar. We did it like the webinar was almost 2 hours last night, but a lot of questions and so forth. But one of the things that I find that retail traders and younger traders, the hardest thing that they go through is their ego. They're afraid to admit that they're wrong on a trade and they don't sell it. If you don't get over this principle, right, you're going to have a very difficult time in trading. You've got to get your ego out. That's why I typically, like on Twitter, I don't like to follow people with big egos, because they're not going to really help you with trading, because at the end of the day, like, nobody really knows what's going to happen, right? Nobody has a crystal ball. But what we do differently is we react to what the market is telling us, and we try to be clever and so forth. But you've got to also, a lot of people who have a big ego, who just never admit that they're wrong, and they just spin things a different way, right? And then they'll tell you what they did, like hindsight. Oh yeah, I sold Nvidia. Yeah, I sold it right this morning, pre-market. Okay, bullshit, you didn't, but you're saving face, right? Because but I see this all the time from traders who have big egos, right? And those guys, if you notice, the ones who are on Twitter who have big egos, they don't show you what their monthly or yearly P&L is, right? They may show you like what their P&L is for like half a day. Oh, look, I made money. Well, that's anybody, right? So just be careful who you're following. You want to follow the people who make adjustments, right? And who are objective. Again, that's my opinion. That's who I try to follow, right? But in any event, I'll move on, because these are lessons to be learned, right? When I try trades and so forth. So, because this would be a nice break higher, that would be wonderful. Other things that I wanted to talk about really quickly. I talked about Bitcoin, talked about the indices. I want to talk about this value versus growth trade, right? So let's bring this up. So this is value versus growth. Now we know that a couple things are similar here, right? Back in the summertime, growth had this huge rally too, versus value didn't do anything, right? And then what happened was a kind of breakdown here, and value really outperformed. Now, if you overlay that, so remember this top here, because I put this chart out a couple weeks ago, and sometimes the timing isn't right. But I would also be aware, because this is a similar run up. It did not make this relationship did not make a new high. And, you know, if value starts leading, value is not a big component of the S&P. So remember this date here just for a second, July 9th, July 10th, right? And now look at the SPY and what happened July 9th, July 10th, right? That's when growth stocks basically peaked out right in here, right? And from there, we had about a 9% drawdown. So I'm not trying to scare you, but I would say be mindful of that. If value really starts to outperform and growth takes a break, um, you might see a bigger pullback in the overall market, right? Because I think that relationship is very similar looking. We'll go back now. I'll go back to this, right? If value really starts to outperform growth, and again, it could be things like healthcare stocks, which had a very good day today. It could be energy stocks, which led the market last week quietly. Nobody really said too much about that. It could be consumer staples. It could be a whole bunch of things. So I would be this is a relationship that I would be paying attention to. And also, keep in mind, even if the market does sell off here. So here's the silver lining, is that your support is not that far away. Major support for the year, which is the top of the value area. We could also, like, one outcome is we could sell off a bit into earnings season, and then it's going to come back. Ultimately, like, the year is probably going to be defined. I hate to break it to you, because everybody wants to, think it's going to be some major thing, that event or something that happens, but it's probably going to be earnings, right? That's what really sets the tone. So we've got earnings coming up just around the corner. Netflix is the first, big, well, it's not tech anymore, it's communications, but that comes on 121. So think about this for, like, right now we're at the 7th, right? Let's say that we do break down, but we break down into support here for the Qs, right? And then we're going to have earnings reports. So here's one thing and this is where I'm going to leave you in this video. What would you rather have the market do? Would you rather have the market continue to go race higher into all these earnings reports and get overbought, or would you rather have the whole group kind of, I don't want to say sell off, but dip a little bit, right? And lower the expectations because prices are lower into those earnings reports. Something, a little bit of food for thought, right? Now, again, I'm not talking about, I know that's crazy because everybody wants immediate gratification, right? The very next 5 minutes, right? And make money and so forth. So going out a couple weeks is going to like blow, people's heads off because that's, oh my God, that's so far away. But, you do, I'm joking. So it's 2 weeks away. So for 2 weeks, like you might, we'll see how it goes. We'll kind of take it day by day. We'll wait for some setups. Remember, the way that it happened, just to rewind a little bit, going back to the end of December and how the beginning of January went, all of a sudden everybody started to see like some really good setups. But if that materializes again, maybe you think about selling the rip a little bit more aggressively. I did that yesterday. I sold, again, going back to my trade blotter, you could see what I did, right, yesterday. Right? Sell, target, new trade, which by the way, I took that off today. Target, 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 right? Target is me, taking profits. Target, right? Or this trade I took off yesterday. This was CEG. Today, a little bit different, right? So I took, boom, out of this trade for profits, IBKR, right? Took a target in this one. I did take a starter position because we did see some calls go up in SMH. I think they were going out to March, right? Actually took a target in this in Exxon. I did put on a value type trade a couple weeks ago. I took my very first target, even though it's not very much, 140, paid 125, but I've been holding that for like 2 weeks, right? And then look at what I did at the end of the day. Here's the SPY trade I talked about. YPF, by the way, profits. That looks pretty good, right? I added back a little bit Nvidia today. I may have to unwind that tomorrow. We'll see. Here's my stop, 138. But I just took off some risk here. Right? Some of the smaller trades, and this one I hit 2 targets in already. This one I hit 1 target in. Right. So again, I'm just getting myself in case this market does want to spill lower a little bit, then I'm getting myself to where it's not going to hurt me, right? I'm protecting myself. All right. So that's it for today's video. And again, it's all about just making adjustments. Like today, yes, down money today, but it's not the end of it's really not that big of a deal because I did the right things all along, right? And ultimately, I'm a trend trader. I'm going to stay in trades. Like I'm not going to be able to time trades perfectly at the top because I don't do that, right? I'll take some off at the, when I see like GEV do what it did yesterday. Certainly, I'm going to take profits into something like that, but I'm not going to take the trade off because I want the trade to go on for as long as it possibly can, right? Because no one knows how long a trend is going to last. Anyway, that's today's video. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow.